Good evening, everyone. Good evening, those that are watching and joining us on the web. Good evening, administrators, cabinet, Superintendent Reed, Mr. Hill. We're going to call to order Tuesday's August 11th, 2020 special meeting of the Southfield Lyndhurst Board of Education. It is now 6:03. Mr. Hill, may we get a roll call?
Mr. Bloomberg,
Present.
Ms. Falkenberg,
Here.
Mrs. Jones,
Here.
Ms. Lee Harris, here,
She's on mute.
Here.
there she is, and Mrs. Ryan.
Mrs. Ryan will not be present today. She has a matter that she had to address with her family.
Am I here? Can you hear me here?
Yes.
Yeah, we got you.
So she will be absent this evening.
Okay.
All right. Hearing that, we can go right into item 2.
Okay.
Discussion items. Looking at 2.1 board policies. Dr. Reed?
Yes. Well, good evening, everybody. We do have 3 policies this evening. One is actually for a first read and 2 that I'm recommending for adoption. So I just want to give a little bit of a discussion on these. The one that we are just doing a first read this evening is our transportation policy. And that is policy 8600 in operations. The policy, the transportation policy was really specific with regards to the distance in which we transported children. K3 was X amount of from the schools, 4 to 6, 7, 8. Well, to be in line with our responsible restart plan for the 2021 school year, there needs to be an adjustment in our policy that reflects that we are going to, actually I kept it open-ended. I mean, right now, the board approved it that we would be doing 2 miles if the student lived 2 miles or more. Instead of writing that into the policy, this is a very fluid process. We know the one thing that's been over the last 5 months that's been constant is change. And so really what this allows, and again, this is a first read, so I'm just explaining what this allows us to do is really have that the superintendent with board approval would make a determination with what those guidelines will be with transporting children. So it's better to leave it that way because again, who knows, we can come back in January, the situation would be different and it'll be a little bit easier rather than changing the whole policy. So that will actually be item, I think for first read is item 4.1 this evening. The other policies is the face mask policy, and that was on last week for a first read, and the face covering policy. And I don't know if you can see this. Can you see my sign I'm holding up? Actually, as part of it, we live in a different world right now, and this is a sign, some of the signage that we'll be putting around our district buildings that face covering is required. This evening, we're asking the board to approve the face covering policy that was presented last week. For those of you that may have not listened in, again, this is a new policy for school districts. And one of the things that I would say is, I don't want to say unique to our policy, but we've actually built in certain items based on conversations that we have had with our teacher leadership members. And one of the things, for instance, though this is mandated now, but all K-12 students and staff and visitors will be required to wear a face covering while in the district. We also know that there are times, I'm going to try to, the print is so small here. One of the other things we wanted to highlight in the policy, we realized that there's times that the face covering or mask may be not worn. And we're going to use that into the discretion of administrator and also a classroom teacher, because administrators aren't in the classroom, but their teachers are actually the supervisor of their classroom. And there is some discretion needed there. We realize that there are exceptions of either children or adults that may have issues with a mask. Hopefully a face shield is better. But I think the last thing I'd like to point out in this is that there are guidelines that need to be developed. And I think that's going to be the important piece that we is really working with our stakeholders in developing some guidelines that really make this policy enforceable, but at the same time practical with what we do. So those are just, again, some of the things that I wanted to recap from there. The third policy this evening is actually a very extensive policy. It is, let me get my notes here. It is a Title IX policy. It is huge. And I think the things that I would like to highlight in there is the fact that there's a lot of definitions. There's actually a few pages really defining what different definitions that are related to this policy. Let me go to my notes here. So a huge part is really they've added a lot of definitions to this policy. The other pieces to this policy is really talking about adopting and publishing a grievance procedure, a notice to parties of a formal complaint, the investigative process, live hearings, determination of responsibility. And I can go on and on. So each one of these areas is very extensive. So this evening, two things. First of all, 3.1 on the agenda is a resolution to waive the reading prior to adoption. Typically, we have one reading and then the second time is up for adoption. This, again, with everything going on and all the changes, I'm bringing this to the board. It needs to be adopted in order to be compliant by August 14th. So we are 3.1 on your agenda this evening is actually a resolution to approve first to waive our own policy so we can adopt this in one swoop. The thing I'd like to come back to is this is such an extensive policy that there is a webinar to even understand its implementation. That webinar is going to be taking place on August 19th. We have two people in our district signed up for it, Melissa Thompson and Bill Miller. They both will be attending the webinar. The reason we have two is the policy itself recommends that we appoint two designees in the district, and they do actually indicate that they'd like one designee to be of one gender and the other designee to be of another gender. So those two will be our compliance designees for our districts, and they're going to go through training. So at this point in time, I'd rather get the training first and, be able to maybe explain it a little more. As I said, it's probably one of the most extensive policies that I've put up in front of the board. And, again, the thing about it is all the trainings are coming after the adoption. But I can tell you that we did work with this policy under the guidance of our attorneys. So we have legal guidance in what we are presenting this evening and have gone through it. I worked one-on-one with our district attorney, and we've made certain changes that we feel that are in the best interest of the district, but also keeping the integrity of the policy and its intent in place as well. So that's my discussion this evening. Just to be able to lay out what is going to be actually being asked to be approved this evening and or as a first read. And that concludes 2.1. If I could keep moving on, let me know, President Jones, I'm on 3.1 right now. So I think it moved. Okay. All right. So recommending to the Board of Education item 3.1. And as I mentioned in my discussion, this is a resolution to waive the readings prior to adoption. So recommending to the Board of Education to waive the reading of policy 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in district programs or activities, in order to adopt the policy language addressing released by Title IX regulations.
All right, may we get a motion to approve item 3.1?
So moved, Falkenberg.
Bloomberg, second.
So moved.
Hold on one second.
Thanks,
Any-
Erin.
Any questions or comments on that process of waiving prior to adoption due to the timing of that, considering our situation?
None from Bloomberg.
Hearing none, may we get a roll call, Mr. Hill?
Ms. Falkenberg,
Aye.
Mr. Bloomberg,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Ms. Lee Harris.
Aye.
All right, Dr. Reed, you can go right into item 4.
So under 4.1 for those listening, again, this is a current policy. It's 8600 transportation. Again, we're recommending going. There was very specific language on how and when students qualify for transportation. In order to be aligned with the board-approved responsible restart plan, our policy needed to change. Instead of always changing the policy, the very small inserted language that we had is that I'll just read, in addition to required by law, the board may provide transportation to elementary and or secondary students to the extent determined by the administration and approved by the board. So what this is going to allow to do, if something maybe 5 months from now, our situation changes and the guidelines change with regards to transportation, we can revisit what those guidelines will be. And that is for this evening, is just a first read. We do have time to put that on for an adoption on the August 25th board meeting. Under 4.2 is the policy, is the face covering policy. And here, hold on. That would be the face covering policy 8550. This was presented at the August 4th meeting as a first read. And one of the things that we talked about is really before we start bringing folks back into the buildings, whether those be staff or students, that it was important for us to have this policy in place. And so presenting this 8450 to the board for approval. And then, of course, the second policy, the policy 2266, is the non-discrimination on the basis of sex in district programs and activities presented for your approval.
May we get a motion to approve items 4.1 and 4.2?
So moved. Well,
Harris.
second, Aaron.
Who motioned? I'm sorry.
Well, and corrected, it's only item 4.2.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be correct. 4.1 is really not being voted on. That's a first read. And then it's just 4.2.
Give Erin the motion. Bloomberg will take the second.
Any questions or comments?
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead, Erin. Or was it Catherine?
Catherine. Yeah, I did have one question. In the first face mask policy, I remember it said something about students must wear a face mask until they're at their desk. I did not notice that in this second one. Just wanted to make sure.
That'll probably be something that'll come out, Ms. Falkenberg, in the guidelines with regards, because really the one blanket statement that we have at top is all K-12 students, all district staff, and school visitors are required to wear face covering while on district property.
Right.
So it's going to blanket everything. And then what we can do in the guidelines is really, because high school is one thing and elementary might be another. So I think those are one of the things that we also have in here that under the teacher's discretion, the removal of masks can happen in the classroom.
Okay.
Took out if 6 feet of social distancing could be adhered to, we took that out and we just left it up to the discretion because there's just too many different scenarios that can fit into that. So yes.
Good. Thank you.
This is Bloomberg. So I have in front of me the version from the first reading. I don't know if it was updated and cleaned up for the version that was posted tonight. However, in paragraph 3, where at the end of sentence 1, by notifying the school community, requiring all school staff, volunteers, and visitors, students aren't included in that. And then underneath, all K through 12 students, all district staff, and all school visitors are required to wear face coverings. That's, if you add students to the paragraph above, you're just it's just a repeat.
Is students considered the school community? No.
So I'm going to look at that. I'm going to look at the third paragraph real quick. So it's Mr. Bloomberg. It's right above the one part that
It says notifying the school community. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I see. As such, during times of elevated communicable disease spread, the superintendent may activate this policy by notifying the school community, notifying all student staffs, and so I think in this language, but we could be clear, is the school community could encompass. Really, it's a little bit. Sometimes the school community encompasses students, staff, community members. You know. And if I hear you correctly, you think the idea is just maybe being clearer and writing the word students in there, Mr. Bloomberg, if I understand you correctly.
That would be correct.
Okay. And that's not an issue at all. I mean, why not be a little clearer to understand your policy? Just to make a note of that in the third paragraph, I'm making a note of it as well. It's going to read, as during these times of elevated communicable diseases, community spread, the superintendent may activate this policy by notifying. We could put the school community to include students. I got it. School staff, volunteers, and visitors. Okay.
And then this is just something really simple, and it just. The cynical person in me kind of came out, but down at the bottom where it talks about any person may be required to temporarily remove a face mask or covering when instructed to do so. I'm not sure if we want to include who can be asking a student or an individual to remove their face mask.
So how about we make a note of this, because I think it might be different for different buildings. You know, as we talked about, good point, as we talked about in our guidelines. So the last paragraph of this policy talks about the superintendent guidelines. I think that would be a perfect point with regards to, you know, whether it's a security personnel, administrator, and I think we can add. We're saying we have the right to do that, folks, no matter who, you know what I mean? You're a parent. Mm-hmm. And I think what we can do is maybe specify, you know, in our, not maybe, we should specify in our guidelines based on identifying what personnel has the authority to do so. And that would be for the protection of our staff members. You know, off the top of my head, I think of with regards to definitely administration and I definitely, you know, and obviously security. I would hope nobody else would get beyond that point that we would have to ask, you know, another type of staff member to put them in that position, because I think the first point of contact when a person enters our buildings is when we would be doing that, and they would be clearance based on that. The nice part I can tell you is, with the exception of Roland, we're still working on that. We, as part of our strategic plan, we have a 2-door entry system that just got put in. Some like you have at Greenview got put in at Sunview and Adrian. Roland's a little bit more complicated based on where the office is. So I think having the physical plant set up like that, Mr. Bloomberg, to even answer your questions, that's going to be the first point of contact. Who will that be? You know what I mean? And because they're not going to be able to get into the buildings like they have before. You know, plus we are limiting visitors during this time anyways. So I have made a note that to align with that part of the policy to, you know, designate those folks that will, you know, obviously have the authority, but should have the authority to be able, permission to do so.
Wonderful.
So I have a question, Linda, because as I reviewed this policy amendment, I actually went through Neola and kind of compared what Neola had versus what we took with your finalized suggestions. And when I look through Neola's and look at other districts, it seemed like that the any person made me feel like it could be inclusive to anyone. And I appreciate the point of contact piece. But when we're in a building and we have students that have face coverings. It could be a teacher, it could be a lunch aide who a kid is putting in a code and they are aware that that's not their code. So I was looking at it and kind of felt like Neola kind of left it as any person, because there could be a variety of levels of supervisory people, and some might not even be in a supervisory position, quote unquote. You have, for example, a lunch aide. That's not necessarily a supervisory position. They have control over the line that they're coming through, but that was what kind of
Well,
made me feel like
you know
that
what?
any person could be inclusive of.
You know what? That's a really good point, because you just gave me a thought here. Not that, again, this is a new policy, and that's why it's great to have the discussion. You know what? It doesn't necessarily have to be supervised. I guess you can look at supervisory in a number of different ways. So if I'm a neonate out on the playground, in a sense, they are the supervisors out there. You're actually
Right. They are.
They are.
Right.
I could I probably worded it a little bit wrong. It should be, because here's what I was thinking when it was saying any person or whatever. Policy is policy, and it's got to be followed. So you've got students running around the school saying, identify yourself, take your mask off. I think it should be any school staff, or however you would say, a law enforcement officer or something.
Sure. And I again, a former elementary principal, I wasn't out on the playground all the time. You had staff members that were designated. You can see kids out there. Somebody comes up in a mask. Obviously, right. If you have a neonate that's out there, they want to know, if they don't have a badge on and we don't recognize them, to be able to identify themselves. It might be someone's parent, regardless, and they can tell them, go to the office. Right now, we don't have to think about that because we're not going to have recess. But I do think with a new policy, you're going to find, and that's why you put them in the guidelines. I think they're going to be evolving as we come across certain situations, and you can do that with guidelines and not have to keep coming back to the board. And I think that's why I think it's important that we involve different stakeholders in helping us develop these guidelines. What I mean by that is have an administrator, have a teacher, have a parent, and seeing it from their perspective, have a board member, and really look at those different, guidelines that as we develop and discover new things. Maybe even have a security officer, a guard on there too. They're going to might think of different points. So I've taken a couple of notes. It does leave it open-ended, which is a good thing. And then the guidelines will ensure, of how we actually implement the policy.
So would it be prudent for, at this point in time, considering we want to remain aligned as best as we can with Neola, because here we go again, we can take apart all policies if that's the case and break them down to be self-identifying. So would it be prudent to leave it as it is, because it is aligned with Neola, and we just continue to monitor the changes that Neola brings forth as suggestions?
Absolutely. When you look at the policy, you see all pretty colors here. You see little Christmas, holiday colors here. You have green and red. Okay, let me. So when you see the black print, those actually are Neola's. To answer your question,
Right.
Joe, that was Neola's wording. When you see green in there, I've added the green because the green was a part of the discussions that we've had. When you see the strikeout in red, the strikeout actually is Neola's wording, but as you can see, in some cases it was optional. And then the reason I struck out all of the A through H, I believe or H through I with the exceptions. When you have that many exceptions, it's very difficult to enforce the policy.
Right.
And I think that's the piece where everybody falls under now 8 different exceptions, and now you don't have a policy that's enforceable. And that's where I'd like to take those strikeouts, and I think those should be points of discussion as we develop the guidelines in that piece. So again, to answer, yes, I agree. We should leave in that statement and then start to, like I said, how we're going to enforce that through our guidelines.
Okay. Then another question that I had is on the transportation piece. Am I reading this correctly that we would still have a possible activation of space available eligibility?
I think that leaves it open if we ever got into that situation. I don't see us enforcing that.
Okay.
Right?
Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'm double reading it.
So I was going to ask, so does that mean that if a family applies for space available eligibility, can't a verdict come back declaring it impractical? Because my whole part is, if we are restricting mileage for our own regular students that have established buses, how do we come in with the space available eligibility when I think that should be declared impractical as well?
Right, and we can actually have further discussion. That's why it's a first read tonight. I'll take that up with the transportation. I think how we looked at it was, we had so many parents who were eligible that didn't take advantage, who said, yeah, I'm eligible, but I don't want to drive my child. And so now you have like a lot of empty buses. So we may have a space available to somebody that wasn't eligible, but has a need for it. And so that kind of leaves it open-ended. I don't know if that's the best thing to do, but I think that was the thought process. If we don't want to have, obviously we're not going to cram kids on a bus, but if we happen to have space available because people aren't taking advantage of it, we may be able to provide a service that's doable and still safe. Still not, I'll ask that question.
I agree with you. I think we should leave it there. And again, like it's always been, on a case-by-case basis, because even
Absolutely.
in a regular operating season, space available eligibility was there and parents can apply, and you might get approved, you might not. And if this happens to be the time where it is declared impractical, then that's what it will be declared.
Right, and we'll never get to the point, again, what we said with our responsible restart is we want one child to a seat unless it's family members. So again, we'd be looking at those current parameters to see if it would happen. I can see where it might seem like a little bit like, how are you going to do that? But that was one scenario we thought of. If like all of a sudden, we have buses, but people aren't taking advantage of it, then maybe we may have some space available if that we set the parameters of what that looks like.
And then last night, as I was watching another district board meeting, this struck my mind. So how we issue the payment in lieu for private schools, if a parent puts in a transportation and payment in lieu of, and that school is online for 9 weeks, are we still cutting checks for them?
Yeah, Mr. I don't know if you want to handle that one, because here's the thing. When we went to 2 miles for our transportation, there were a lot of non-public students that no longer qualify, which means they would not get payment in lieu of because they no longer qualify for transportation. Mr. Hill, I got that right? And that,
yeah. Right.
I don't know if Mr. Murphy's on here this evening.
Yeah, I'm here. So payment in lieu, first of all, it's people outside that 2 miles anyway. And now we have some extra buses. We're actually transporting them instead of the private transportation. So some of that payment in lieu is going to go away that way as well. But usually it's because there's 1 or 2 kids way out and it's worth paying them instead. And right now, all those private schools are not taking the 9-week remote. So right now they're actually in, and we're going to start transporting them on the 17th.
So are we tracking if we have a particular school that is not in physical session? That was my question. I'm familiar with how it operates. I'm just curious, if a parent applies and that school is on a 9-week or they convert to a 9-week, are we still cutting payments?
Yeah, we would keep track of that throughout the year, because if they're going to get rid of 9 weeks or a quarter, then they should only get reduced a quarter payment, I'm sure.
Yes, that was my question, the tracking mechanism, to be certain.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
All right. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, may we get a roll call, Mr. Hill?
Are we approving this with the changes?
I think the last change is going to be on observation with Neola. The first change, I believe it was a yes. Am I correct, Dr. Reed?
Yes, I was adding the word students above to
the third paragraph.
In the third paragraph, I have that noted.
Yeah, in the third paragraph, add to include students. With
yes.
Change. Okay. Okay. Ms. Lee Harris.
Ms. Lee Harris?
And
Internet connection gone.
there we go.
Maybe she'll be back by the time you call. Oh, here she comes. Ms. Lee Harris?
I'm back. I'm sorry.
All right, we're voting. So Ms. Lee Harris, Mr. Bloomberg,
Aye.
Ms. Falkenberg,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones.
Aye. All right. We can go.
I do not have any need for executive session, Mrs. Jones.
That's perfect. We don't have any other business. We don't have any new business, old business, no comments from public. May we get a motion to adjourn? I guess. 6:34.
So moved, Falkenberg.
Bloomberg second.
Mr. Bloomberg, it is now 6:34. May we get a roll call on adjournment?
Ms. Falkenberg,
Aye.
Mr. Bloomberg,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Ms. Lee Harris.
Aye.
Fastest meeting ever in history.
So
right,
I am going,
thank you guys
Mr. Hill,
for
am I
joining
good
us.
to stop streaming right now?
Yeah, we're
Yes,
good.
thank you all for joining us this
right.
evening. You may stop streaming.
All right, thank you. Let me get,
You all
wait,
have a wonderful evening.
wait. I didn't stop streaming just yet. Hold on. And why can't I find it right this minute? Hold on. Where's my three little,
Aaron, keep your eyes on the road.
yeah, okay. I am trying to figure out where this stop streaming is. Also, my button's gone. Hold on. Let me see if I can get, oh, here we go. I had it closed off. Hold on.